A lonely rancher finds an Apache slave in the desert and never imagines she would stay with him. The desert stretched endlessly under a blazing sun, its sand like gold dust scattered across the earth. The wind whispered through the dunes, carrying with it a loneliness that matched Elias's own. He rode his horse slowly, the leather of the saddle creaking under his weight. Every step of the animal sank into the hot sand, leaving behind a trail of prints that the wind would soon erase. Elias had lived alone for many years. The ranch was his life, but it was also his solitude. Nights were the hardest, when the silence pressed against his ears, and memories of family lost in a fire returned like shadows dancing across his mind. He had built walls around his heart, walls higher than the fences he raised to keep the cattle safe. Yet despite his efforts, a quiet yearning lingered, a longing for something he could not name. It was during the early hours of evening, when the sun began its slow descent and the desert turned to fire and shadow, that Elias saw her. At first she was nothing more than a flicker in the heat haze, a movement too sudden to be a mirage. He slowed his horse, squinting against the sunlight. A figure lay collapsed among the dunes. The woman was small, slender, her hair dark and tangled with sand. Her clothes were torn, dusty, and worn. Elias felt a strange pull in his chest, a stirring of concern he had not known in years. He dismounted carefully, his boots sinking into the hot sand as he approached her. "Hey," he said softly, careful not to startle her. "Are you okay?" The woman stirred but did not speak. Her eyes, wide and alert, reflected a fire in the distance, the last rays of the sun catching the depths of her gaze. They were eyes that had seen pain, but also eyes that refused to break completely. Elias knelt beside her, noticing the faint scars on her arms and the weariness etched into her face. "My name is Elias," he said. "I can help you. Come with me." She hesitated, glancing around as if expecting the desert itself to strike her down. Then slowly she allowed him to lift her. Her body was light, almost weightless, yet her presence was commanding in a way Elias could not explain. The ride back to his ranch was quiet. The wind stirred the sand around them, carrying with it the scent of sage and distant mountains. Elias kept glancing at her. She did not speak, but her gaze wandered over the desert, alert and wary. There was an air about her, something both fragile and unyielding, as if she carried a secret too heavy for words. When they reached the ranch, Elias led her inside. The house was simple but sturdy, built from stone and timber, surrounded by the wide expanse of his lands. It was a place of safety but also of silence. The woman, Aeon, as he had quietly decided to call her, sat on a chair near the fireplace, her eyes following every movement. Elias offered her water and a blanket. She took them without a word, her hands careful, almost reverent. There was a grace in her movements, a quiet dignity that seemed out of place in someone so clearly fleeing from suffering. "Do you need food?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "Not yet." Her voice was soft, almost musical, and yet it carried a weight that made Elias pause. She spoke with caution, choosing words as though each one had to be measured against some unseen danger. Elias felt an ache in his chest, a mixture of curiosity, concern, and something more, something he could not name. He realized he had not felt this kind of attention on another person for years. The emptiness he had carried seemed, for a brief moment, to shrink. Night fell over the desert, painting the sky in shades of violet and crimson. The wind whispered secrets through the canyons and the stars began to blink awake. Elias watched Aeon as she moved to the window, her silhouette framed by the glow of the moon. "Do you see them too?" she asked suddenly. "See what?" Elias replied, frowning. "The lights," she said, pointing toward the distant horizon. "They move like they have a life of their own." Elias looked but saw nothing but the ordinary stars. "I don't see anything," she nodded, her expression unreadable. "Some things are not for everyone to see, but I can." He did not press further. There was an air of mystery about her, something ancient and untamed. He sensed that her presence here was not entirely by chance, that the desert itself had guided her to his ranch. The following days passed slowly, each one a test of patience and trust. Aeon was cautious, observing Elias and his routines, yet she helped with the chores, feeding the animals, mending fences, fetching water. Her silence spoke as loudly as any words, and Elias began to learn the rhythm of her movements, the way she watched the wind, the desert, and him. One afternoon, a dust storm rolled across the plains, darkening the sky and rattling the windows. Elias found Aeon standing at the edge of the ranch, her hair whipped by the wind, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "Don't go out there," he warned, grabbing her arm. She looked at him, her gaze steady. "I have to see. The storm, it tells stories." Elias felt a pang of unease. There was something in her words, a sense that she was connected to forces he could not understand. But before he could protest further, the wind tore at the earth, swirling sand and dust around them like a living thing. The storm passed as quickly as it had arrived, leaving silence in its wake. Aeon returned, her face streaked with sand, but her eyes glimmered with a strange light. Elias said nothing, only watched as she moved with an elegance that seemed almost unreal. That night the desert held its breath. Elias lay in bed, thinking of the woman who had appeared from nowhere, who carried with her the weight of secrets and the strength of mountains. He could not stop imagining her out there alone, facing the unforgiving desert, and he realized he feared losing her before he even understood what she meant to him. In the middle of the night, he woke to find her gone. Panic surged through him as he leapt from his bed, grabbing his coat and lantern. The ranch was quiet, too quiet, and the desert beyond was a vast, empty stretch of shadows. Then on the doorstep he saw a small token lying in the sand, a delicate stone carved with strange symbols, glowing faintly under the moonlight. He picked it up, heart pounding. It was not just a stone. It was a message, a sign that Aeon's presence was tied to something far greater than he could imagine. He ran into the night, calling her name, but the desert swallowed his voice. For a moment, all he felt was the wind, the sand, and the echo of a bond that had begun but was not yet understood. And then, just as the first light of dawn painted the dunes in gold, he saw her silhouette at the edge of the horizon. She did not wave, did not speak, only stood there tall and resolute. Her eyes met his, and for a moment the world seemed suspended between heartbeats. Elias knew in that instant that this encounter was no accident. Aeon's life, her story, was bound to his now in ways he could not yet understand. The desert had given him a gift, a challenge, a mystery, and a chance for connection he had long denied himself. The wind rose again, whispering across the dunes. And as Elias approached her, he realized that their journey was only beginning. Something deep and unknown waited for them both, and the desert would not give up its secrets easily. The first rays of sunlight touched the horizon, casting long shadows across the sand. Elias took her hand gently, feeling the warmth of life and courage in her grip. Together, they would face the desert, the storms, and the mysteries it held. But even as they returned to the ranch, a sense of unease lingered. The glowing stone, the strange lights, the feeling of being watched. It was as if the desert itself was alive, and it had chosen them both for a story far larger than either could imagine. And in the silence of that dawn, as the wind carried whispers from the mountains, Elias understood that the woman he had saved would not leave, not because she had nowhere else to go, but because destiny, in its quiet, inexorable way, had already bound her to him. Yet the desert held its secrets still, and Elias knew with a shiver that ran down his spine that Aeon's past, and perhaps her future, was far more dangerous and magical than he could ever imagine. The sun rose fully, painting the sky in gold. And somewhere beyond the dunes, unseen eyes watched them, waiting, patient, knowing. The story had begun. The morning sun rose slowly over the desert, painting the sand in gold and bronze. Elias sat on the porch of his ranch, the glowing stone from the night before clutched in his hand. Its warmth was gentle, but its glow pulsed softly as if alive. He turned it over, studying the intricate carvings, wondering who or what had left it for him. Aeon had not returned yet. He had searched the desert at dawn, calling her name, but the wind swallowed his voice. The thought of her alone in the vast desert sent a tightening through his chest. His heart, which had long been quiet, now thumped with unease. By mid-morning, a shadow appeared at the edge of the ranch. Elia's chest lifted with relief. It was Aeon. She moved like a wraith, silent and graceful, her dark hair whipping in the breeze. Her eyes, however, were wary, scanning the horizon as though she expected danger to follow her back. "You left," Elias said softly as she approached. "I was worried." "I had to," Aeon replied, her voice calm but tense. "Some things cannot wait." "Some shadows are faster than the wind." Elias frowned. "Shadows?" She shook her head, a faint smile touching her lips. "Not shadows you can see, but ones you feel." He did not press further. There were mysteries in her presence that he could not yet touch, and pressing would only drive her away. The day passed slowly. Aeon moved among the animals with quiet efficiency, her hands gentle on the horses and goats. Elias watched her, noting the careful way she handled each creature, as if she understood their fears without needing words. The desert wind carried stories, and he realized she was a part of those stories, more connected to the land than he could ever be. That evening, the sky darkened with a sudden storm. Clouds rolled in like heavy drapes across the horizon. The wind whipped around the ranch, rattling the windows and sending sand into every corner. Elias and Aeon were working in the barn when the first drops fell. "We need to secure the animals," Elias shouted over the roar of the wind. Aeon nodded, moving with a speed and precision that surprised him. Together, they corralled the cattle and horses, guiding them into the sturdy shelter of the barn. Outside, the storm raged, and Elias felt a strange energy in the air, a power that seemed almost alive. "It's not just a storm," Aeon said suddenly, her voice tense. "It watches, it tests." Elias looked at her, confusion in his eyes. "Tests what?" "Us," she replied simply. "The desert always tests those who come into its heart." He glanced out into the swirling sands, feeling the weight of her words. There was something in her gaze, a warning and a secret he could not yet understand. Yet even in the face of danger, he felt an undeniable pull toward her. Her presence, silent and strong, stirred something deep in him. The storm passed as quickly as it had arrived. The desert was quiet again, the sand glistening in the pale moonlight. Elias walked beside Aeon to the edge of the ranch, where the dunes stretched endlessly into the horizon. "Do you see them?" she asked, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. Elias frowned. "See what?" "The lights," she said, pointing toward the distant desert. Faint, moving glimmers that danced above the dunes. "They are always there, watching, waiting." He watched but saw only shifting shadows in the moonlight. "I don't see anything," he admitted. "That is because you are not ready," Aeon said quietly. "Some things are not for everyone to see, but I can, and they follow me, or perhaps they wait for you too." Elias felt a chill despite the warmth of the night. Her words carried weight, and the sense of an unseen presence made the desert feel alive, almost conscious. In the days that followed, Elias began to notice more strange things. Animals in the desert moved as though sensing something beyond the ordinary. The wind carried whispers he could not understand. Shadows in the corners of the ranch seemed to shift even without light. And Aeon, always calm and silent, would sometimes stand for hours, staring into the distance, her eyes glowing faintly under the moon. One evening, as the sun sank behind the dunes, Elias approached her. She was near the edge of the ranch, her fingers brushing the tall grass, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "You are different," he said. "I have never met anyone like you. I don't know what you are or what you have seen, but I feel drawn to you." Aeon turned slowly, her dark eyes meeting his. There was a storm of emotions behind them: fear, longing, caution, and something else he could not name. "And you are different too," she said softly. "You are not afraid to be alone, but you are afraid to be known. I can see it." He swallowed hard, feeling the truth of her words in his chest. "And yet here we are, both strangers bound by something," she nodded. "Something, yes." That night Elias could not sleep. He walked to the porch holding the glowing stone. Its warmth reminded him of her presence, of the connection that had begun, fragile but undeniable. The desert lay still, but its silence was deceptive. Somewhere in the distance, shadows moved, watching, waiting. The next day, trouble arrived. A group of men appeared on the horizon, dust rising behind their horses. They were armed, their faces masked by scarves. Elias recognized the danger immediately. They were not ordinary bandits. They moved with precision, their purpose clear. They were looking for Aeon. Aeon's eyes darkened as she noticed them. "They are coming for me," she said, her voice tight. "We must move quickly." Elias felt a surge of protective instinct. He grabbed a rifle and led her to the barn, securing the doors. "They won't take you," he said firmly. "Not while I am here." The men arrived at the edge of the ranch, shouting commands. Aeon stepped forward, her presence calm but powerful. She did not attack, yet the air around her seemed to ripple with energy. Elias felt the hairs on his neck rise. There was something in her, something beyond human, something that these men feared even without knowing why. A tense standoff began. The men advanced, but Aeon's gaze never wavered. Her voice, soft but commanding, carried across the yard. "Leave now, or regret it." Elias could not explain why, but the men faltered. It was as though an invisible force held them back. After a moment, they retreated, muttering threats but unwilling to confront her fully. When they were gone, Elias approached Aeon. What was that?" he asked, awe and fear mingling in his voice. She shook her head, her dark hair falling across her face. "A gift and a curse. I do not control it fully. It protects me, but it can also destroy." He looked at her, seeing for the first time the depth of the burden she carried. She was more than a woman fleeing danger. She was a being connected to forces he could barely comprehend. And yet, in that moment, he felt a fierce determination to protect her, no matter the cost. That night the desert was quiet again, but Elias could not sleep. He sat by the fire, thinking of the woman who had entered his life, carrying shadows and secrets with her. He realized that their bond was growing, silent but strong, a connection forged in trust, fear, and the strange magic of the desert. Aeon approached quietly, sitting beside him. She did not speak, but her presence was enough. Elias reached out, taking her hand gently. She did not pull away. For a moment they simply sat together, the firelight dancing on their faces, two souls bound by circumstance and something deeper, something neither fully understood. "Why do you stay?" Elias asked softly. "Why are you here with me?" Aeon looked at him, her eyes reflecting the flickering flames. "Because I have no other place to go," she said quietly, "and because something tells me I belong here with you." Elias felt a warmth in his chest he had not known in years. The desert, the storms, the shadows, they all seemed to fade in the face of this simple truth. Yet even as he felt it, a shiver ran down his spine. He knew her past was not finished, that danger lingered like a dark cloud on the horizon. And then, as he gazed at her, a sudden movement in the distance caught his eye, a figure, barely visible, moving across the dunes. It vanished before he could focus, leaving only a whisper of sand in its wake. Elias realized, with a sinking feeling, that this was only the beginning. Aeon's past, her curse, and the mysterious forces that followed her were not done with them yet. The desert was alive with secrets, and their lives were now entangled in ways that could not be undone. He took her hand again, holding it tightly. "Whatever comes," he said, his voice firm, "we face it together." Aeon nodded, her eyes softening, yet filled with the weight of unspoken truths. "Together," she repeated. The night deepened, stars shimmering above the endless desert. The wind carried whispers of unseen watchers, moving in the shadows, patient and eternal. And somewhere beyond the dunes, Elias and Aeon knew. Unseen eyes waited, testing, watching, and weaving the threads of a story that had only just begun. The desert held its breath. The desert stretched under a sky deep and dark, stars scattered like silver dust. The wind whispered across the dunes, carrying secrets that only Aeon seemed to hear. Elias followed her silently, his hand resting on hers, feeling her heartbeat, a steady, fragile rhythm that somehow felt strong. For days, Aeon had led him toward the distant canyons, places hidden from ordinary travelers, places she said held answers. Her movements were confident, but Elias could feel the tension in her shoulders, the weight of something she had carried alone for too long. "I need to show you something," Aeon said softly, her voice barely audible over the wind. "Something that explains why I cannot simply live freely, why I cannot fully stay anywhere for long." Elias squeezed her hand. "Whatever it is, we face it together." Aeon hesitated, glancing at him with dark, wary eyes. "It may change you, it may frighten you, but you deserve to know." They rode until the sun dipped below the horizon, the sky burning with shades of orange and crimson. The canyons rose like jagged teeth, shadowed and silent. Aeon led Elias down a narrow path between rocks, their horses' hooves echoing softly. Finally, they reached a small cave, hidden behind a veil of hanging vines and desert brush. Inside, the air was cooler, scented with earth and stone. The walls were covered with ancient markings, symbols of animals, stars, and shapes that pulsed faintly, as if alive. Elias stepped closer, awed. These are incredible." Aeon's fingers brushed the symbols, her touch reverent. "They are more than drawings. They are the language of my ancestors. They hold power and they hold the curse." Elias frowned. "Curse?" She turned to him, her face shadowed by the dim light. "I carry a curse placed upon my bloodline generations ago. It binds me, controls me in ways I cannot fully escape. If I stay in one place too long, or if someone loves me, it will bring suffering, not just to me, but to those I care about." Elias felt a chill run through him. The stories he had heard as a boy, of spirits, curses, and ancient magic, were nothing compared to this quiet truth standing before him. Yet, despite the fear, he felt a pull toward her stronger than anything he had ever known. "How long have you carried this?" he asked softly. "Since birth," she said. "I learned to hide, to move, to survive, but I have never stopped fearing losing someone because of me." Elias swallowed. "I don't care about the curse," he said firmly. "I care about you." Aeon's eyes softened, but a shadow passed through them. "I want to believe that," she whispered, "but the desert tests everyone. It watches who they trust. It does not forgive mistakes." Elias stepped closer. "Then we won't make mistakes. We'll face it together." For the first time, a faint smile touched her lips. The cave seemed to pulse around them, the air thick with power. Symbols glowed faintly under Aeon's touch, responding to her presence. Elias realized she was not just afraid, she was connected to the energy of the land itself, a guardian of secrets and spirits. That night they camped at the entrance of the cave. The stars reflected in Aeon's dark eyes, and Elias felt the quiet intimacy of being near her, even in silence. "I need to show you something else," she said softly as they sat beside the fire. "A part of me you may not understand until you see it." Elias nodded. "I am ready." Aeon stood, moving toward the deeper part of the cave. The walls glowed faintly, casting shadows that danced like spirits in the firelight. She traced a symbol on the floor, and suddenly the air shifted. A faint, shimmering portal appeared before them, a ripple in the air, glowing like liquid silver. "This," Aeon said, "is the spirit realm. It is where the curse lives, where it takes form. I must confront it if we are to have any chance at freedom." Elias felt a tightening in his chest. "You want me to come with you?" She nodded. "I cannot face it alone, not this time." Taking a deep breath, Elias stepped forward, feeling the strange pull of the portal. The air shimmered around them, and suddenly the world changed. The desert, the cave, the stars, all vanished. They stood in a realm of silver light and shadow, where whispers filled the air and shapes moved like living mist. Aeon held his hand tightly. "Do not let go," she whispered. From the shadows, a figure emerged, a dark, looming presence, its face hidden beneath a hood of mist. It radiated cold power, and Elias felt fear claw at his chest. "You have come," the figure said, voice like the wind over dead sand. "You cannot escape me, Aeon, not now, not ever." Aeon stepped forward, her own presence glowing faintly. "I am not afraid," she said, though Elias could hear the tension in her voice. "You carry the blood of the condemned," the figure said. "And anyone who loves you will suffer." Elias felt a surge of anger and fear. He stepped beside her. "Then I will stand with her," he said firmly. "Whatever this is, whatever curse, we face it together." The figure laughed, a sound that echoed through the silver mist. "Brave, foolish. Let us see if your heart is strong enough." Suddenly, the realm shifted. They were surrounded by illusions, visions of their deepest fears. Elias saw his family burning again, the fire he had carried in his memory. Aeon saw endless deserts, endless storms and shadows consuming her, taking away the people she loved. They clung to each other, finding strength in the touch of a hand, the presence of someone who would not let go. The illusions pressed on, relentless, but Elias' voice rang out steady and unwavering. "You are not alone," he shouted. "Not now, not ever." Aeon's power flared, glowing brightly. The shadows recoiled, hissing and writhing. Together they faced the visions, the fears, the weight of the curse pressing on them. And slowly the illusions faded, dissolving into the silver mist. The dark figure remained, watching. "You survive," it said, "but the curse is not broken, only weakened. The bond you share gives you strength, but it also binds you. Remember this, child of the desert." Aeon bowed her head. "I understand." The figure faded into mist, leaving them alone in the strange realm. Elias held her tightly, feeling her tremble, not from fear but from the release of tension, from the weight of truth finally shared. When they returned to the physical world, the cave was silent, the stars outside bright against the night sky. Elias looked at Aeon, awe and love mingling in his chest. She was still fragile, still bound by forces beyond his understanding, but she had shown him the truth of herself, and in doing so had drawn him closer than ever. "You could have stayed hidden," Elias said softly, "but you didn't, you trusted me." Aeon's eyes glimmered. "I had no choice. The desert, the curse, it chooses for me, but I am glad you were here. You make this burden lighter." Elias smiled, brushing her hair from her face. "Then we carry it together." The next morning the desert was quiet, the air shimmering with heat and light. Yet Elias could sense the lingering presence of the curse, the shadows waiting beyond the horizon. Aeon stood at the edge of the ranch, her dark eyes scanning the dunes. "They are still out there," she said softly, a warning in her voice. Elias stepped beside her. "Then we stay ready. Whatever comes, we face it together." She looked at him, a faint smile on her lips. "Together," she whispered, but the desert had its own plans. Far across the dunes, eyes watched them, unseen and patient. The bond between Elias and Aeon had grown, but the forces that followed her were relentless, testing their courage and trust at every turn. And somewhere deep in the heart of the desert, the shadows stirred, waiting for the moment when the curse would demand its due. The night was silent, but the desert never truly slept. The desert lay under a pale silver moon, its sand gleaming like frost. The wind was still, as if holding its breath. Elias and Aeon stood at the edge of the ranch, hand in hand, feeling the weight of the night. The events of the past days pressed on them, the cursed visions, the spirit realm, the shadows that never truly left. Yet in their unity there was strength. "I thought I understood danger," Elias said quietly, "but this is something else." Aeon nodded. Her dark eyes reflected the moonlight, glimmering with both determination and weariness. "It is more than danger. It is a choice." The curse tests not just me but us together. It seeks fear, doubt, separation. Elias tightened his grip on her hand. Then we do not give it what it wants. Whatever comes, we face it side by side. The desert stirred. From the far dunes, a shadow rose, moving like liquid darkness. Elias felt the familiar chill of the supernatural, the presence that had always followed Aeon, waiting for its moment to strike. "They are coming," Aeon whispered. "The spirit that cursed me, it will not forgive our defiance easily." Elias' heart pounded. He had always been a man of action, but this was something beyond any battle he had faced. Yet when he looked at Aeon, he felt a courage he had never known. She was fragile, yes, but also fierce, and her strength now flowed through him. Together, they stepped into the desert, moving toward the source of the darkness. The wind swirled around them, carrying whispers and shadows. The sand beneath their feet seemed to pulse with energy, alive and aware. As they reached the center of the dunes, the dark figure emerged. Its form shifted constantly, sometimes human, sometimes like smoke, sometimes like the desert itself. Its voice, deep and echoing, filled the air. "You survive still," it said. "You dare to love, you dare to bind yourselves to each other, foolish mortals." Aeon stepped forward, her aura glowing faintly, casting light into the shadows. "Love is not foolish," she said. "It is the strongest force of all, and we will not be broken by you." Elias followed her, placing himself beside her. "We are together," he said firmly. "That is enough." The shadow figure laughed, a sound that rippled like a storm. Then with sudden speed it attacked, not with force but with illusions, visions of despair. Elias saw his family, lost in fire again, their voices calling for him. Aeon saw herself alone, powerless, surrounded by endless storms and shadowed spirits. But this time they did not falter. Elias reached for Aeon, holding her tightly. "We face it together," he said, his voice a steady anchor. Aeon's power flared, brighter than ever. The symbols of her ancestors, carried within her blood, ignited across the desert sands. Light and shadow collided, and the illusions began to dissolve, screaming as they faded. The figure recoiled, its form wavering. "Impossible, your bond. It is stronger than fear alone." Aeon took a deep breath, stepping closer to the shadow. "I choose to live. I choose to love. And I will not let the curse control me or him." The figure howled, a sound like the desert breaking apart, then dissolved into a mist of silver light scattering across the dunes. For the first time, silence returned. The desert seemed still, calm, as though it had witnessed the victory and acknowledged it. Elias let out a long breath, holding Aeon close. "It's over," he said softly. "Not completely," Aeon admitted. "The curse, it is weakened, yes, but it is still part of me. It will always be a shadow, a warning." Elias looked at her, understanding the truth in her words. "Then we live with it," he said firmly. "Together, nothing else matters." They returned to the ranch, the first light of dawn painting the desert in gold. For a moment the world seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what would come next. But in that quiet, Elias felt a profound peace. He had found someone who shared his burdens, who made his solitude bearable, who taught him courage in ways he had never known. Days passed and the ranch returned to its rhythms, feeding animals, repairing fences, tending the land. But now every task carried a new meaning. Elias and Aeon worked side by side, their movements synchronized, their trust deepening with every glance, every shared silence. One evening they rode together across the desert. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the dunes. Aeon reached out, touching the symbols of the desert with her hand, feeling the energy hum beneath her fingers. "You feel it too, don't you?" she asked softly. Elias nodded. "I feel it in you and with you. The desert, it is alive, but it no longer frightens me, not with you," she smiled faintly. "The desert has always tested those who enter it, but you are steady. You do not fear what you cannot see, you only see me." Elias' heart lifted. "And I will always see you. No matter the shadows, no matter the past, no matter the curse. I choose you." The wind stirred, carrying whispers that were no longer threatening but curious, as if acknowledging the strength of their bond. The desert had witnessed countless stories, but few like this. A man and a woman, bound by fate, love, and courage, standing against the unseen forces of the world. Night fell, the sky filled with stars. Aeon leaned against Elias, resting her head on his shoulder. The ranch lay silent behind them, the animals settled, the desert stretching endlessly beyond. "I thought I would always be running," Aeon said softly. "Running from the curse, from shadows, from my own fears. But with you I can stay. I can choose where to belong." Elias kissed her forehead gently. "You belong here, you belong with me, and I belong with you. Whatever comes, we face it together." For a long moment they watched the stars, the silence between them filled with trust, with hope, and with the quiet knowledge that their love was stronger than any curse. But the desert remained. It had secrets yet to reveal, mysteries yet to test, and shadows yet to stir. Elias and Aeon knew that their journey was not over, not completely. Yet for the first time they faced the future without fear, hand in hand, hearts bound by choice, courage, and love. And somewhere beyond the dunes, unseen eyes lingered, not with malice but with quiet curiosity. The desert had tested them and they had survived. Together. The sun rose again over the desert, spilling light across the sand, and for the first time in a long while, the world seemed full of promise. Elias and Aeon turned back to the ranch, walking slowly through the dunes, their hands entwined. The shadows of the past, the curse, and the desert itself were no longer chains. They were threads woven into the tapestry of their lives, a story of survival, trust, and love. The wind carried a gentle warmth, and for the first time the desert seemed to breathe with them, sharing in their triumph, their bond, and their unspoken promise, that whatever darkness came they would face it together, never letting go. The journey had changed them, strengthened them, and given them a love forged in fire, shadow, and light. And as they reached the ranch, Elias realized something he had not believed possible. He was no longer lonely, not while she was by his side. The desert, eternal and mysterious, stretched behind them, holding its secrets and whispers. But for now, Elias and Aeon had found their place, together. The night faded, the stars twinkled one last time, and the desert waited patiently, knowing that love, like the wind, the sand, and the fire of courage, was a force stronger than any curse. And somewhere in that vast expanse, destiny smiled.